Can I just say, Mr. Ferrari, real quick? Mr. Lineker was a great servant to Leicester.
He was.
A great servant to football.
He was second only to Jamie Vardy.
Well, yeah. And do you know what? Watching that video one night in Turin where Gaza got the second yellow and missed his place in the final, it showed his decency. And this is where
Gary Lineker makes a gesture towards the manager, showing that Gaza's in tears, and we need to keep an eye on Gaza. Gaza's in tears. Gaza's in tears,
shows that,
and we need to keep an eye on him. And he's gesturing to the referee. Just to remind listeners what you're talking about. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
Yes, thanks, Nick.
But now, where we are now, was it the right call or not?
Look, Gary Lineker's a great footballer. He was a great broadcaster. Maybe he's a 64-year-old man. Let's take the heat off this guy, and the kind of vitriol we had from the last caller. We don't need that. Right. He's a 64-year-old man.
He's incredibly bright. I mean, it's not as if he's in any way approaching his dotage. He's an extremely intelligent man.
Well, he is. He was a great footballer. He was a great servant to Leicester. And as I say, at risk of repeating myself, one night in Turin, he kept an eye on Gaza. And let's take the heat off this guy.
Okay, you say that. I mean, I think the successful businesses that he's run, he's probably used to having a little bit of heat in the kitchen, but certainly the headlines are on him now. John in Brighton. You relieved to hear the news, or what, John? Good morning.
Yeah, definitely. I think, thank God he's moving on. He's just past his sell-by date. He's become boring and predictable. And there's so many other footballers that could be commentating and doing their punditry on the shows.
When you say you mean his commentary has been boring?
Yeah, he's just too laid back. He's just become a bit tedious. And I don't know why does he think anyone's interested in his tedious ramblings on politics and Gaza? I mean, what's that got to do with it?
I mean, I have to say, it does get a lot of attention. He's in all the newspapers again now. I think it's the third lead on a lot of the news websites. It's because he does have a heck of a following, you have to say it.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that anyone... Well, yeah, but that doesn't mean that he's talking any sense anyway. I mean, anyone can chuck out idiotic comments.
We talk about all sorts of politicians. That doesn't mean they've got any sense either, does it, John?
Yeah, but he's a football. He should stick to football. Yeah, I mean, obviously he forced himself out in the end. The BBC couldn't put up with this much longer, could they?
No,
coming out with this.
Right.
He thought it's bigger than the shows he was presenting and the games and everything. And I think that his time was up, really.
No sadness from John in Brighton.
Good morning, sir. I'm thinking that Mr. Lineker has done a remarkable job and made people aware of children being starved to death and people getting killed. We heard Tom Fletcher the other day at the UN. Everything that he said is happening there is horrible. And Gary Lineker is making people aware of it. And now he's being lambasted for making people aware of it because they said, you might have offended a few people.
He's the problem is he has been warned by his bosses that he has to stay impartial. If you work for the BBC, you
should have to stay in some things. You can't stay impartial.
That's in his employment contract.
No, it's not. He's a freelancer. He was asked to do that.
He was told by the BBC. You know this.
Exactly.
Indeed, he was effectively suspended in 2023. So he's been told he can't have those political opinions.
I appreciate what you're saying. Maybe it's to do with the programme, but he does state it's his personal view. And as a human being, we should be looking at his morality, not rather his contract. Morality comes first rather over a contract when children are dying.
Right.
And the fact is, he's made people aware of this situation, what's going on, because he has a large platform, and he has responsibility to make people aware because he has a large platform and say, this is what's going on. There's nothing wrong with that. I can't believe people morality ring up in the morning complaining, giving him personal attacks just because he spoke about children being killed.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So your anger, if there is any, or your concern is over the way that the BBC have behaved.
Yeah, but they should realise what he's talking about. Maybe, yes, have a chat with him to say, listen, you don't bring it into the programming of football, for God's sake. But, if you're speaking in your personal views, and apparently he was a freelancer, and it didn't really... some of the rules...
I mean, I'm speaking as well myself. Freelance, you're still held to certain contractual issues. Just because you're freelance, you can't say, well, then none of the contractual issues could defer to me because I'm a freelancer. You still have to abide by what your editorial managers tell you to do, and he was told on a number of occasions. Okay, so thank you, Satwant. That's completely the other side. Khalid in Enfield, who do you think emerges from this worse, the BBC or Gary Lineker?
Morning.
Hello, sir.
Well, I think Gary Lineker does, because actually he remains a man of principle who hasn't
I asked who comes out
changed his
worse.
opinion.
Who comes out
Who
worse?
comes out worse?
Yes.
Well, I think financially the BBC will. And also I think, listening to one of your fellows earlier, Jonathan, talking about him being thick and stupid, I think Gary Lineker really represents every British bloke. And
Just to clarify, he was saying he was thick and stupid about historical matters pertaining to Jewish people.
well, do you know what? We didn't need to. He didn't need to be insulted in such a way. And actually, I think it's also cover for the fact that Israel is still killing children. You mentioned it this morning: 400 and something children dead.
464 people. They're not all children.
That's right. And I was watching it all over the weekend. That's going on, and we're at that point where it's either kneecap, it's either Gazan children BBC documentaries, or it's Gary Lineker. And Gary Lineker is so much a British bloke, and we're attacking British blokes who are saying we don't like seeing genocide in Gaza.
Khalid, strong views. Thank you. Emma's in Soho. Emma, is it the right decision? Who emerges from this with any credit, in your view? Good morning.
The BBC, good morning. As far as I'm concerned, the BBC, if you can say they emerge with credit, because this has taken a long time. My view is, Gary Lineker is sharing content that influences his audience, and I have children who like sports and like football and trust him. So for me, it's been tragic to listen to people criticising this morning someone like Jonathan Satwant, who's an educated and well-respected historian, and want to effectively overlook anti-Jewish sentiment because he was kind to Gaza. That makes me feel that book by David Bazile, Jews Don't Count, that talks about how Jews get criticised and it doesn't count, but other minorities do, and you get into a lot of trouble. It just reeks of that from where I'm sitting.
But Emma, if I pursue the line that I did with Mrs. Sashadoti, and I don't subscribe to that, but let's just use it as a point of debate, why can't someone who's stupid be allowed to have an opinion?
Well, as we all know, and I'm sure you do because you use your platform wonderfully, I think that, he is being paid by the British public and has a responsibility. And at least if he wants to put out all this anti-Semitic content, he needs to say that he's an anti-Semite. He's got a big platform and he's talking about things that are swaying millions of people. And as such, as a British taxpayer, I'm not keen to have my taxpayers' money go towards paying him.
Emma, thank you for your input. I don't think he's an anti-Semite. I've met him only a few times. I just don't think there's an anti-Semitic bone in his body. But I do think he's become a little bit tunnel vision as regards this, and unfortunately in his concern, as so many sane people do, the concern they have for the number of people who are being killed or being seriously injured in Gaza, that has unfortunately rather coloured his views here, and he's sort of lost some of his finer antennae, is what I would say. But I wouldn't have him down as an anti-Semite for a split second. Emma, enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
I think about Gary Lineker, he has a right as a broadcaster, as a private person, to...
Well, no, he doesn't have a right as a broadcaster, does he?
No.
Not for the BBC, no.
Not for the BBC, I agree with that entirely.
Yeah.
Now... You say he's not anti-Semitic. I have to take your word on that. But he does get his views from sites that are absolutely riddled with it. Now, this thing on the rat, he may not have understood it. You have to take his word for it.
Yeah.
I'm doubtful. That site itself is massively imbued with an awful lot of anti-Semitism. He doesn't post any tweets on that and doesn't seem to notice it. But I would like you to kick back on the accusation of genocide.
All right, well, I often do, and I know what you're saying, because if it was genocide, it seems to be one of the longest and slowest genocides. But there are people, of course, who hold very, very strong views, Joel, and we have to allow views to be expressed here. Otherwise, there's little point in trying to do what we do. Joel, thank you for that. Right, I'm acutely aware I've not done any of the social media that's coming, so just give me a minute to do that. Brian of SW16, of Brighton of London, says, I believe Lineker has revealed his hatred towards Israel. I'm looking forward to watching Match of the Day again, having avoided doing so because of seeing this pompous, overpaid man. Lynn in Devon, Who needs Lineker? Look at Starmer, a perfect example of someone whose driving value is power, influence and money, which he does by smarming up to others in power to secure his future. He cares about Britain. Don't make me laugh. Matt in Sidcup. I don't care if Lineker disagrees with Suella Braverman, who says pretty horrible stuff every time she speaks. It just makes him even more of a legend. What is it with right-wing weirdos and Gary Lineker? Saying all of that, it is time for him to hang up his microphone. The amount of flack he is getting is hysterical. All right,